What's happening, real outdoors enthusiasts? Today I am going to talk first aid. But before we get to that, I want to just put a quick disclaimer out there. I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. I am not certified in any way other than I have wilderness first aid certification. That's really just so that I can go on high adventure camps with the Boy Scouts. It does give you some first aid training. I did work in healthcare for quite a long time. I am familiar with first aid, but I am by no means an expert. This is just what I take when I go into the outdoors for my first aid kit. If you like what you see here on The Real Outdoors, click that red subscribe button and be sure to hit that bell also so you get notified when I come out with new content. So let's get into the content of this video, your outdoors first aid kit. This is my high adventure, long-term first aid kit. It's a little big, but it's also because I use this when I'm going out with the Scouts. So I am the responsible first aid provider for usually a patrol size of Scouts. So we're talking anywhere between 8 and 12 people between Scouts and adults. And so it is a little big. If I were going to take a personal first aid kit, I'd take one of those advanced medical systems, the little yellow first aid kits. You can pick them up for about 15 bucks. Again, I will put those links in the description below. So let's jump right into my first aid kit and what I have in it. Starting right from the outside, you can see I have the red cross on the outside. This is so if I am not the one providing first aid treatment to someone, I want them to be able to look in my pack and recognize the first aid kit right off the bat. Right on the outside, I also have some paramedics shears, nice and easy to get to. They're good for cutting clothing off if you need to. I've never had that need in the outdoors, but they're there if I do need it. They do come in very handy for cutting bandages, tape, things like that to the shape and size that you need. And those are strapped right onto the outside. They don't weigh a lot. They're very lightweight. Let me get these out of here. And you can see they have the little nub at the end of there so that you're not accidentally cutting the patient when you're providing first aid. Once you're inside, you can see there's like 3 different areas where you have first aid gear. We're gonna start with this little pocket on the end here. Nice and easy zippered pocket. Inside, I have this Ziploc bag full of gloves. Gloves are real important to have anytime you're providing first aid, not only to prevent you from infection from the patient, but also from you giving an infection to the patient if your hands are dirty or have some bacteria and things on there. So you always want to have gloves, always want to put gloves on anytime you're providing first aid care to someone. Also inside here, very easy to get to, I have these little iodine patches. So these are just like those alcohol prep pads, except these have iodine in them. And I keep these right there, real handy, easy to get to, because that's one of the first things I'm going to do is disinfect the area that needs first aid, the scrape, the cut, whatever it may be. I'm going to first want to clean it up, get all the dirt and debris and yuckiness out of there. And so I have these very easy. I have a few reasons for using these instead of alcohol prep pads. I do have alcohol prep pads. This is what I prefer though. The alcohol prep pads are really just a backup. And the reasons I use this are the iodine disinfects just about as well as the alcohol. Again, not an expert. I don't know, one may be better than the other. I know they're both disinfectants. So they both disinfect the wound when you're using them. But the iodine will actually get sticky once it dries, so it'll give you a surface to adhere the bandage to. It helps the bandage stay in place because it is sticky. Another thing a friend of mine taught me or told me, who was an army medic, is that you can use these pads to disinfect your water. You just take the little pad, put it in your water. It's iodine, so it will disinfect the water, kind of just like the disinfecting tablets that you might use to disinfect water when you're in the backcountry. Now, it is a last resort type situation. You don't know how many of these to put into how much water, things like that. You don't want to overdo it. But again, if you're in a survival situation where you need to disinfect the water so that you can keep yourself hydrated, these will work in a pinch if you need to do that. So it provides an additional use in a worst case emergency scenario. I'm going to move on to this next little section. First thing, easy to grab. This is what some people call an Israeli dressing. It's kind of like an ace bandage mixed with a gauze pad mixed with a compression dressing. So it does all those things. You can wrap the wound. It's really designed for the compression part. It keeps pressure on the wound to stop bleeding. And that's what this dressing is for. You don't have to keep holding your hand on someone's wound in order to stop the bleeding and keep pressure on it. You don't have to use a tourniquet. This is an all-in-one situation. And I'll post a picture here of what it looks like outside of here. It's basically like a gauze pad with an elastic wrap that you put around it, and that helps keep the pressure on the wound and stop the bleeding. Really a worst case scenario, I hope I never have to use these, especially on a scout in the outdoors. But it's good to have if you do have a heavy bleed situation in the backcountry. Next up, I have what you might call an ACE bandage, elastic wrap bandage. I basically carry the biggest one with me that I think I might need, and that's it. I don't carry a bunch of other ACE bandages. Same Army medic gave me the advice to just carry what you need, and then you can cut it to the size you need. That way you don't have to carry a whole bunch of ACE bandages that take up a lot of room, that are bulky, that are heavy. You have the one that's worst case scenario, biggest one you think you might need, and then cut it down to what you actually need in the field. Now, I also have tape. You're gonna need a fair amount of tape to put bandages on in the outdoors, to secure things, helps keep moleskin in place, things like that. I've actually found this elastic tape that sticks to itself. You can see that sticks to itself, so you don't need tape for that. I found that holds moleskin in place a lot better than regular tape, and so that's what we use that for. Probably gonna need to add a little more of that to my first aid kit. Back here I have these little iodine swabs. Now I have these in addition to the alcohol prep pads because I thought these would be really good to get that stickiness in a very specific area. You can use that little Q-tip that's on the end of here filled with iodine and put a little patch of iodine right where you want it, right where you want the bandage to stick. And that's what I have these for. I didn't get too carried away. They're a little bulky, and my understanding is they can dry out fairly easily even inside these packages, and then they really wouldn't be a whole lot of use to you. So I only took 4. It's just something I'm trying out. This is something I added to my first aid kit since my Philmont trip last year. Gonna see how they work, how it goes. Maybe it's something I keep, maybe not. We're just gonna kind of test that one out. And right behind that, I have 4x4 gauze pads. Now, these are the only gauze pads I carry. Again, just like the ACE bandage, I'm taking the biggest one that I think I'm gonna need, and then I can cut it down to smaller patches if I need to. In fact, I can even use these to create Band-Aids if I want. Just cut off a little patch of this for your gauze pad, use tape as the Band-Aid part, throw a little bacitracin antibiotic ointment down there, and you have a basic Band-Aid. So that it serves a lot of purposes. And again, I carry the big 4x4s. I've only got about 4 or 5 in here. Whatever I think I might need in the backcountry for a 12-day trip. That's really what this is designed for, is a 12-day trip in the outdoors. And then I just use what I need out of those 4x4 gauze pads. Moving on to the last area here, we have another military style gauze wrap. This is very similar to this blue tape. This is technically more like a tape. This is more like an ACE bandage, but it has that same compression waviness to it. It sticks to itself, so this gives me additional gauze that I can use in a situation where I need to stop bleeding, or I need to immobilize something, or I need to keep gauze in a specific location. This is what that is good for. Also back here, this is a worst case scenario. I hope I never have to use this. This is my tourniquet, but if you're in the outdoors, someone has an arterial bleed, something like that, where you need to stop the bleeding to save an extremity, you need to have a tourniquet on hand. And so this is truly an emergency item. Hopefully never have to use it, but I would never want to be in the outdoors without some style of tourniquet. This is the one with the little rod that you twist in order to get the pressure and stop the bleeding. They do make ones now that don't come with the rod, so that's something I might switch out to because it's less bulky, easier to carry, and works just as effectively. But that is my tourniquet. Here I have a SAM finger splint. I used to carry a big SAM splint. These are kind of malleable splints that you can shape to whatever you want. You can see you can use it for your finger. If you hurt your finger, wrap some tape or gauze around that to stabilize a broken finger if you need to. I used to have a big one which was more for arms and legs if you needed to splint that. It was bulky, it was hard to carry, it was heavy, so I took that out of my first aid kit because my thought was, I'm in the outdoors, I can make a makeshift splint out of sticks and a triangle bandage if I need to. So it wasn't something I felt was necessary for my first aid kit. It's nice, they're really cool, I love SAM splints, but the bigger one was just too much to carry in a wilderness first aid kit. But I do have the little one in case somebody breaks a finger or something like that. Next up, we have my antibiotic ointment, and I use bacitracin. This is based on advice from my instructor in my wilderness first aid class. He suggested using bacitracin instead of polysporin or neosporin because a fair number of people are actually allergic to neosporin and polysporin, and so if you use bacitracin, which also is an antibiotic ointment, just like polysporin or neosporin, works just as well, but it doesn't have the allergic properties that the other two have, and so this just eliminates having some allergic reactions in the backcountry that you just don't want to have. I would never have a first aid kit without tweezers, especially in the outdoors. They come in real handy for cleaning out wounds, for getting splinters out of fingers and things like that. Just really good to have a pair of tweezers on hand when you're in the outdoors. And as I mentioned earlier, I've got some alcohol prep pads. These are really just kind of a backup for my iodine prep pads. I want to make sure that I'm able to clean a wound if I need to. I don't want to run out, so I'm just sure that I have backup. This is an absolute necessity in the outdoors. Either Gold Bond powder, or I used the Glide, the stuff that looks like a little deodorant. Last year, either one, you need something to help with chafing. This works really well. Last year I used the Glide deodorant style one around my waist, where the waist belt from your pack hits and rubs over time. It worked really well there. I may switch this out for that. That is a little more intimate when it comes to other areas of chafing, the Glide deodorant stick. And so this is nice. It's just something you can kind of dump down the shorts if you need to, so to speak. So it doesn't get quite as personal as the Glide deodorant does. But this is an absolute must. You need to have something in the outdoors to help with chafing, because inevitably over time you are going to have some issues with chafing when you're hiking long distances in the outdoors. Next up, we have a triangular bandage. This is for creating slings. So this wraps around your arm. It's shaped like a triangle or a neckerchief. If you've ever seen a scout with a neckerchief, that's a big reason they have the neckerchiefs, is so that they can use a sling if they need to in the outdoors. I definitely wanted to have this in my first aid kit. I have dislocated my shoulder on a hunting trip previously, which makes me much more likely to dislocate my shoulder again. And if I do that in the outdoors, I want to be able to put this arm up in a sling once I put that shoulder back in joint. Same thing with anybody else on your trip. If you're responsible for first aid, if they fall, it's a good possibility that they could dislocate their shoulder or break an arm. This provides a good sling for you to use for those who may have those types of injuries. Next, this is kind of my little medicine thing. I do need to add some things to this that we used last year and that I just don't have in here right now. This has vitamin I or ibuprofen, Advil, whatever it is you use. That was an almost daily use for me as an older hiker last year at Philmont. So I always have Advil in my first aid kit. What I do need to add is an anti-diarrheal in here. Having diarrhea in the backcountry is fairly likely, and you want to have some way to treat that, because you don't want to be miserable with diarrhea in the backcountry if you can avoid it. And then of course I have a little hand sanitizer just to keep things clean, hopefully keep you from getting diarrhea in the process, but just to keep your hands clean, keep the people's hands clean that are with you on the trek. Back in the last pocket I have a space blanket or emergency blanket. It's basically exactly what it is used for. It's an emergency blanket. If somebody's sleeping bag gets wet on the trip and they have no way to keep warm, this will help keep them warm. If they fall in a creek crossing or something and they get all wet and they're getting cold, you want to have some way to keep them warm, keep them from getting hypothermia, so I have an emergency space blanket in there. Here I have bandages, band-aids, whatever you want to call them. Just have a little pack of those. They're nice and convenient. As I mentioned earlier, I could create them out of gauze and tape and bacitracin, things like that, but it's nice to have. They're super convenient. This year I actually added these new Curad ones that have a clotting material in the pad, in the gauze pad of the Band-Aid, so it helps stop the bleeding. Most Band-Aids for small cuts, you don't really have to worry about that clotting, but when you're going out with kids, it's a nice thing to have because they'll really focus on that bleeding until it stops. So the sooner you can get the bleeding stopped, the sooner they feel like they're okay and they can keep going forward with the hike. Something else I have in my little Band-Aid pack here are these little ampules of liquid adhesive. So this again is to help get the Band-Aid to stick. If you're all wet and nasty and dirty, it's hard to get the Band-Aid to stick sometimes, or especially to get the Band-Aid to stay in place. So this just kind of helps with that situation, similar to the iodine. Last but not least, I have my moleskin pouch. So this has 3 different types of moleskin in it. The first is leukotape. It's also called kinesiology tape or K-tape, different names for it, but I've found this works really well on blisters, and the best part is it stays in place better than anything else you use for blisters. It's very lightweight, very easy to carry. Also have some safety pins in here to puncture the blister if you need to. They also work really well for splinters, also work really well for holding bandages in place, so it's good to have a few safety pins with you, and I do have those in with my leukotape. Now, a friend recommended to me, he said, stop using moleskin, you need to get mole foam. And so you can see I've got some mole foam, which is a much thicker version of moleskin, provides a lot of padding. We had some scouts last year that had real problems with blisters that were very painful. This really helps with that situation, gives you a lot of padding, a lot of comfort, avoids having that miserable hike for those scouts that are having issues with blisters. So I've got a couple pieces of mole foam in there, and then of course I've got the classic moleskin that I use for blisters in my little moleskin pack. So that's basically a blister treatment pack within my first aid kit, all in one little Ziploc pouch. Something you may notice with my first aid kit is I leave a lot of things in their original packaging. I do this because I may not be the person providing first aid care to an injured person. So when they open my first aid kit, I want them to be able to tell what everything is as much as possible. So when they look at the 4x4 gauze pads, it says 4x4 gauze pads on the packaging. So they know what they're grabbing, they know what they're looking at. They may not know how to use it, but at least it tells them what it is. And some, like the moleskin, it'll even give you instructions on the back of how to use the moleskin to treat the injury. That's my wilderness first aid kit. It's what I'll use at Philmont this year. It's what I use on big backpacking trips with lots of groups of people where I'm responsible for their first aid if they were to become injured. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do I need to add or subtract from this? What do you have in your kit? Leave those comments below and let me know. I love to get the feedback on first aid kits. I'm constantly playing with it, changing it, adding to it, taking away from it. I'm even looking at changing the container I keep it in to just a Ziploc bag. But this one is so well organized. I know it's a little bulky, it's very heavy material, but everything's nice and organized. So if I'm not the one using it, someone opens it up, it's all nice and open, you can see where everything is. It's hard to do that with Ziploc bags. As I said, I'm always interested in fine-tuning my first aid kit, so I'd love to hear from you guys what you keep in yours, what I should add, what I should take away, what you use in your home first aid kit, because I also use this for my home first aid kit. This is what I'm using now during the quarantine if we get injured. I actually cut myself on the way to shoot this video and grabbed one of the alcohol prep pads just to clean up the little scrape that I got on my way to the shed. So yeah, this is my first aid kit for at home and for on the trail with groups of people. Give us a thumbs up for this wilderness first aid kit video. Click that red subscribe button so you can join us on all our outdoors adventures. And be sure to click that notification bell so you get notified when we add new content to the channel. Appreciate you joining us. Hope you got something out of the video. I look forward to seeing you in the real outdoors.